I always make sure my edges, like the corner edge, is well covered in paint. So I'll sometimes bring my brush around the edge.
Welcome to the Bold Artist Podcast Summer Sessions. Today I have some surprise Q&A questions for my co-host Charla Maarschalk.
Like they're really a surprise. I have
Yeah,
no
they really
idea.
are a surprise. Now sometimes you might be familiar with the fact that sometimes Charla and I have pre-show conversations, which really we should be recording. But this time she has no clue what I'm going to ask her. And honestly, you know, we're calling these summer sessions the hot topics of the season. I don't know if this would be considered a hot topic, but it's definitely a topic that artists talk about. And that might mean it seems like a boring topic to other people, but there were 3 artists together in Charla's studio about 2 weeks ago. We were all in Charla's studio filming, and there arose a subject in the studio that I thought, we all love talking about this. We actually keep talking about this. And it ended up being like maybe a good 15-minute conversation about how artists finish the sides of their canvas. And what's really interesting to me is that I have always felt the need to wrap my painting. And what that means is like, I feel the need that when I'm painting, I need to bring my colors around the side and like have everything be cohesive around the edge. And Charla said something that blew my mind. Do you remember what you said to me, Charla?
No.
You said, no, you really did, like complete mind shift for me. You said, that isn't a natural part of the process. And I was like, what? Hang on a sec. No wonder I can't stay in flow when I'm doing that. I have not realized that painting and wrapping around the edge was actually taking me constantly out of my like flow and zone, because I'd be having such a good time painting and right in the zone, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, make sure that wraps around the side, and then I start doing that in order to get this certain aesthetic. And you don't paint that way. Tell me your process.
Well, when we were having that conversation, I remember Liz Rani who was in the studio with us that day, and she was saying like that I think I got the impression, now if I went back and could replay the conversation, maybe she said something a bit differently, but this is how I remember it, that she tried doing it like after, like she'd paint the painting and then she would try to wrap it afterwards. And it was like, this is just work. Like, it's too much work to try and do it after the fact. And then you're saying that you were doing it during the fact. And that's probably where I would have made that comment. Well, it's just not a natural part of the process. Because I have thought about it a lot. Because in photography, when you get a canvas wrap, you always have the option to wrap the photo right around or have the black edge. And when they wrap the photo, it looks kind of cool because it's a continuation of the photo. But it always bugged me because it would take parts of the photo off the front, and then you wouldn't be able to see that entire composition on the front. So I didn't even love it as a photographer, but other people, the viewers, thought it was really cool and fun. And maybe it's like slightly 3D or something, maybe, and that creates a little bit of an interest. But it kind of bugged me as a photographer. So as an artist, I was like, how can I do that as part of the process? And it just wasn't. It was like, you can't see it. It's a lot of work. So what I do is, I don't think I've ever painted it or wrapped it. I just paint my edges black. And what I do now, which I didn't always do, but I buy black gesso because it's a matte finish. It's a really nice finish. And a local artist called Nikki Balfour was one who told me that's what she did. And because I was just using like buying regular black paint, and she's like, well, I use the gesso because of the finish is so nice and it's less distracting. And black gesso is really black, and the blacker the black, it means that the more light doesn't bounce off of it, right? So it almost becomes like a barrier to everything else that's around it. You know, it becomes like a boundary point for your eye, maybe, so that's like a border so it doesn't go off onto something else. That's how I look at it in my own head. So I really love a black matte gesso edge because it's like a really good finish.
Do you do this at the end after you've painted your piece? You then paint it black, or do you start with a black edge?
I paint it after, because it always drips one way or another out around the edges. Now, something I do when I'm painting is, like, say I'm painting a black or a blue background on the art, I always make sure my edges, like the corner edge, is well covered in paint. So I'll sometimes bring my brush around the edge just to make sure the edge is painted, because sometimes if you're painting a low key, like dark blue painting, and you go to paint your black edge, there can be this awkward white space that you haven't painted over. And if you bring the black too far around to the front, it can mess with the front of your canvas. So when I'm painting, I do make sure I bring it over the corner, that corner that makes the transition from the front to the side. I always bring the paint around so that I don't have to bring the black too far into the front. So I guess there's a little bit of an art form to
Yeah, absolutely. And even if this isn't a hot topic, I think it's a very valuable topic. I think every artist has wondered, what do I do with those edges? And we're all trying to find our style and what we think works and what looks good on the wall too, because I love a nice wrapped edge. As you said, in photography, it's so classy, but it takes away from the photograph. It takes, that 2 inches off the sides. And then as a painter, I've tried to bring the piece around, but I find it interrupts my flow. But just as a practical tip, what do you paint the edges with? Are you using a paintbrush and then like keeping a really straight line, or can you roller? Can you like get a little roller and like and just be done, or like what's the process there?
Well, I use a brush. My work is often really textured, and if I'm intentionally texturing it, I'll often really like my edges to be very textured and thick. So sometimes what that will look like is the texture, you've got the edge of the paint, and the texture will actually like come out over that edge a little bit. So if I use a roller, would never work because there's just too much texture that's coming out around the edge. So I use a paintbrush, and I use a very flat, thin paintbrush that creates a nice sharp edge. And gesso is also a little bit, like, because I use heavy body paints, gesso is a thinner paint. So I'm often wetting my brush so that paint stays really liquidy but doesn't go transparent, and so it can create a sharp edge. And I also don't paint my edges the same day as I paint my work. I usually leave them, like, honestly, I just leave them until I have a show. And then when I have a show, I'm like, crap, I have 10 pieces that need edges painted, which really takes all day by the time you get it all, especially if they're big. So it would be ideal to probably do that at the end of your painting, so they're always completed and they're finished. But usually you can tell if one of my pieces hasn't been in a show because their edges aren't painted. So
that'll be the giveaway. That's the giveaway. So another question that I hear a lot of Bold School community members ask you is if you varnish your paintings.
Oh, varnish. See, this is a controversial topic right there.
Oh, well, let's just keep it, we got to keep it short today for the summer sessions, but just the nutshell of, how Charla feels about varnish.
This is how I feel.
Yeah, because it's controversial.
Yeah, this is just maybe. Well, I used to varnish them when I first started. I was terrified I was going to do something wrong, and if I was going to be a professional artist, then I had to do everything exactly right. But there's not a lot of right ways. Well, no, there are right ways, but there's usually a variety of right ways. And so I was always taking the time to varnish my work. And so there is a couple of reasons to varnish your work. If you're using, I'm probably jumping ahead, but I started realizing that sometimes I would use matte paints and sometimes I would be using glossy paints. And depending if I was using like a gel medium to mix in and I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. And then if you use these fluorescent paints, like these super neon paints that Golden has now, they have a different gleam to them. Is that the right word? So by varnishing your work, you can just create a surface that's, get rid of all of those different surfaces, which is definitely a reason to varnish your work. other than what people think is the typical reason to varnish your work is to give it like archival quality. So there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I was always varnishing my work, but what I was realizing was that the advice I was getting was I was varnishing my work with the varnishes that had the same properties as acrylic paint. And like I think there was one guy was talking about like a watered down version of a medium or something. I can't even remember because it was so long ago. And then I heard probably somebody on a podcast say, your varnishes are made out of the same thing that acrylic paint is made out of, and acrylic paint is very durable and light safe, and it's just the way it's made now. It's almost like nothing can harm it. Like I'm not too careful when I'm moving my work because it takes a lot to damage an acrylic surface. Now I have done it, so I wouldn't say throw your work around, but it's very durable. And so I actually stopped varnishing my work because it was another step and a time-consuming step that irritated me, and I wanted the easy way out. So I stopped varnishing my work. But I know I've talked to people who still talk about light safeness, I guess, like the life of your artwork. If you're putting it in front of the sun and the sun is blasting on it every single day, there is a possibility that in 100 years that work will have faded, even in acrylic piece. And varnishing a lot of the time is to protect the colors so that they stay vibrant. So that's as much as I know about the topic. I don't have a lot more knowledge on it to share, but
no, that's excellent. Both of these tips that you've shared today about finishing the sides, how you finish the sides of your canvas, and even your approach to varnishing is really helpful, because I know every artist has to make those decisions for themselves of how they're gonna paint the sides and how they're gonna finish with some sort of top coat or not. And so I appreciate you sharing with us here on the Bold Artist Podcast Summer Sessions. And I hope that all the watchers and listeners will make sure to get on our newsletter. You can find that at boldschool.com. And you can find us on Instagram at Bold School Inc. and right here on YouTube on the Bold School channel. And until next time, keep creating.